Welcome back to CrimsonCast. I'm Galen Clavio. He's Scott Caulfield. And we're doing our this is the second time we've done a live post-game show on the same day of the game, Scott. I feel like we're setting unrealistic expectations for the audience at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, for two guys who both have busy jobs, who both have like two kids under the age of 6, I think we're setting an unrealistic precedent. But I like it. We're good.
We love you, the viewer / listener, depending on when you're actually consuming this. You are the reason that we do things. But no, we wanted to talk about this game because it was a good game. It was a good game for IU. It was, I think, an important game for a bunch of reasons that we're going to talk about. And, it was one of those situations where you thought that they were going to come in and play well, but you didn't 100% know for sure. And, that's always the question mark with IU football. It's like how do they convert the will of the fans or, the conceptual idea of IU football as a team that's making moves and making strides and all of that into what actually goes on the field. And in this case, they did a really good job. And we're going to talk all about it. I was at the game. I was only there in person for a half. Unfortunately, my co-pilot is 3 years old and she kind of got tired at halftime. And so we had to bug out at that point. But I got a chance to watch the remainder of the game. And I know, Scott, you got a chance to watch the whole thing as well. So let's just start off, talk about what's going on. IU wins the game 38-10. Biggest win in the history of the series between IU and Ball State. And certainly, I think, above all else, like even taking out the individual elements of this particular game, the idea that IU comes out and kind of puts a hurting on another team, it's just not that normal of an occurrence, at least not with FBS competition. And so it's nice to see IU come out and win by, certainly cover a large spread and also kind of push it beyond that point as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what we were talking about after FIU and Virginia is they won, but they didn't really, exert their will on the game. And they exerted their will on this game. I mean, they came in and they played a Ball State team, which, as you mentioned in the preview, was about 50 spots lower than us in kind of all major rankings. But, to be fair, they went into Notre Dame, and whether Notre Dame's good or bad, like they went into a tough environment and played very well. While they didn't look rattled against us, we were able to exert our will more on them than Notre Dame was able to the week before. So it looked like a very one-sided matchup. It looked really good. And got a lot of good things here to talk about coming out of this game, but overall it's good. And I think, we'll wrap up with this, but it sets up a really good opportunity for Indiana to kind of be at the threshold of kind of taking what would be a nice next step as a program. But this is always the point. We want to get through these games. We look at it like, as we look at the season, we got 3 games. We got to come in. We got to win. If we want a chance to make a bowl, we got to take care of business. And, first check mark down, we took care of business.
Yeah, no, that was the thing. I think I posted this on the CrimsonCast feed. This was always the beginning of the season, right? Not the midpoint of the season. Like, yes, you're halfway to bowl eligibility, but the season really only fully got started by beating the first 3 teams that IU had on the schedule. I mean, yes, you have a Power 5 opponent. You have a couple of teams that have given you trouble in the past, but these were not particularly strong teams or strong programs that you're playing in these non-conference games. And we've seen IU lose those games. We've seen in the past 7 or 8 years losing to North Texas on the road or losing to Navy, both home and away, and losing to Bowling Green. So the fact that this IU team, young as it is, has been able to take care of business in 3 consecutive games with varying levels of dominance, from having to do the last down defending against Virginia to this game where it was really out of reach by the end of the second quarter. It's nice to see that progression, and it's nice to see them just have those games in their back pocket. Now, as tough as this Big Ten schedule is, now you're not scrambling. You put yourself in a position where if you take care of business with your 3 home games that feel, winnable, the Purdue game, the Michigan or the Minnesota game, and then, the Maryland game, and then the Iowa game, and then you pick up a road victory, whether it's Rutgers or whether it's, Minnesota on the road or something like that. Now you've managed to edge yourself up to 7 wins. You have a little bit of leeway there in that you might be able to lose one of those games now and still make a bowl. Whereas if you lost one of these early games against non-conference opposition, you wouldn't be in that position. And so, we've seen a lot of IU teams not be able to handle their business in these sorts of contests. So it is really gratifying to see this particular IU team handling their business. Before we get any deeper into the analysis, if any of you would like to chat with us, you can certainly leave us a comment on the Twitter, I guess is what it's called. Sorry, I'm fried, folks. I'm not going to lie. Me and the family were out tailgating at 7:15 or 7:30 this morning, and it was hot. So a little bit fried there. But you can also chat with us on YouTube if you're listening.
How was the made to order breakfast sandwiches? I know
they were really good. I thought I was actually. I mean, it was kind of we had this idea. My wife and I had this idea of how to do them. We had like a spiced butter mixture that went on the croissants to go along with either we had sausage or bacon to go along with egg and cheese, and I thought they were really good. So
a bold move. We do that next week too. I mean, there's no reason why you can't do breakfast sandwiches for dinner.
Well, I'm hoping they just open the lots at like 8 a.m. and let us do another 12-hour tailgate a la Ohio State last year. So, but anyway, if you'd like to leave comments, we had one comment already from Matt Uhl, which we'll talk about, and we've got a couple of other people, I think, chiming in as well. We'd love to hear from you. But anyway, let's go back and talk about the game itself. I think first and foremost, when you look at what happened in this game, you have to start with the rushing attack for this IU squad. I mean, it was by far the most successful of the two phases of offense for IU. And, Stevie Scott last week, ran for over 200 yards. Granted, he was like the primary option. It was going to be really hard for him to do that again. But instead of doing that, he just was very efficient. 18 carries, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, he had the one fumble, which was too bad. You could kind of see it developing. We had seats pretty close to the field, and you could see when he started to do the reach, I was like, that's going to be problematic, and he ended up fumbling it. But every other time he carried the ball security was great. Just gashing this Ball State defense for yards, and this is the second time he's done it. It's not just Stevie Scott, but he deserves a lot of credit for as a freshman just coming in and just grabbing the mantle and being like, yeah, this is my job. I'm going to be starting running back, and I'm going to tear off runs. He didn't break a huge run. I think his longest was 18 yards on the game, but he was just this steady, rumbling presence in the backfield. And it's one of those things that we certainly have seen at IU, but it's been a long time, it feels like, since a guy this young came in and established himself. I mean, it took Tevin Coleman a couple of years. Certainly, we only had Jordan Howard for a year, and he was already a graduate transfer at that point. But for Stevie Scott to come in and run as well as he had, it's really a testament, I think, to him and what he's been able to do so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'll leave the positive stuff to the end to end on a high note. But it was interesting listening to your preview to this game. You still have to take a step back. Like, the concerning part to me coming into this game was like Stevie Scott looked really good in 1.5 games. But you still have to remember, like, he's our third string running back coming into the season. Like, you still have a third string running, still have a quarterback who you're not sure of his arm strength. Like, he was still the third string running back, which at some point I'm always nervous. Like, is that going to, like, are we going to have a game where like, oh yeah, that's why he was our third string running back? I will say, sorry, I'm going positive.
Yeah.
Like, in this game, he looks insane. Like, he looks fantastic. Yeah. Like, if you told me that guy was a 5-star recruit, like the best running back recruit we've gotten since Tevin Coleman, I'd be like, I see it. Because, I mean, the line is great. The line is opening up holes for him, but he's great at waiting for the holes, getting him hit. And he had some things, like, I know it's already on some highlight reels on ESPN, but like the score to make it to 38, like in the beginning of the fourth quarter, like he gets hit dead on the 4-yard line and then takes 4 guys with him to the end zone. Like, he looks amazing, almost to the point you're like, why the hell is this guy third string? I mean, like,
I think honestly the answer there is he's a freshman. He's a true freshman, and this coaching staff, like many coaching staffs, it's not something that's unique to Tom Allen and his group. You're not just going to hand the job to a freshman, even if they might be the best person to do it. And I think at running back, it's particularly tough because physically it's a whole new ball game. And, ball security wise, it's a whole new ball game. Like, you're dealing with a whole bunch of things. The blocking schemes are more complicated. The offense is more complicated. You're having to do more things. And so I look at it and say, well, look, if you've got a guy like Cole Guest, or if you've got a guy like Morgan Ellison who proved over a year that they can rush at the Big Ten level, then obviously they're going to get the starting job. The fact that Stevie Scott's been able to step in and get these reps early and do as much as he has been able to do with them, I think is just a testament to his maturity emotionally and mentally, being able to step in and not be fazed by everything. And yeah, you can say, well, this was just Ball State, but Virginia is an ACC team, and he had to play that game in a monsoon and still managed to hold on to the ball and be really the metronome by which IU's offense ran last week. So I get what you're saying, but I really do think any coach, not just Tom Allen, but any coach is going to be hesitant to just hand the keys to a skill position starting job to a true freshman, until they see them prove it in a college game. We've seen a lot of really hyped true freshmen that didn't, end up doing what we thought they were going to do. So I don't really blame them too much for that.
Well, and I also think it's a testament, in a week where we got another really nice recruit. I think it's a testament to, we've had, the quiet thing that really progressed when Kevin Wilson took over was ever since he took over as coach, the recruiting, and Tom Allen has kept it going. I still look at Tom Allen as an extension of Kevin Wilson's staff because he was. But, our recruiting has just gotten better every single year. And I think now you're able to see it where, I think 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, if we had a Morgan Ellison situation and then a Cole Guest situation where you go to the third string running back, we would have been kind of DOA on the running game for the entire year. Fortunately, you saw it the year we lost 2 quarterbacks. We're stuck with like Xander Diamont, and it's like our passing game is DOA. And I think it is a testament that you are kind of in a spot where you can go to a third string running back and not be in a complete world of hurt. Like we look really good. And so I think you see, this is what 4, 5, 6 years of solid recruiting is going to get you, that you have a lot of depth at all these positions. And I will say too, like just some Stevie Scott superlatives, kind of looking at the numbers, I know he had one really big game, but coming into this game, he was 11th in the country in rushing, like not just freshman, just in the country rushing. He's at 388 yards now. That puts him 4th on that list. Now that's not taking into account everybody else has to play. So he gets an extra game there. I haven't gone through and added the list up yet, but it's odd too. Like I'm looking at the it's 2010 was a horrible year. Trey Burgess led Indiana that year with 352 yards all season. Stevie Scott already has 388. And, my big thing talking about looking at, not too much preview, but looking at Michigan State for next year or next week, we have an opportunity to kind of, I don't want to go back to the breakthrough joke. We have an opportunity to kind of really take that next step, and I do not want to get way ahead of myself, but, Stevie Scott's going to be somewhere in the top 10 in the country in rushing. If we're able to win and he's able to have another big game, like there's some, we won't get Heisman, but there's some, possible like, freshman rookie of the year and, rushing leader of the Big Ten. Like, I mean, we could kind of make a statement. There's some really nice things trending upward here going into Michigan State, and Stevie Scott and his stats are one of those.
Well, let's pump the brakes a little bit on the rookie of the year thing, freshman of the year. I do think, I do think it's important though to keep in mind that Stevie Scott's looked excellent, but Ronnie Walker Jr. came in, looked excellent. I think that with the right backs, this offensive line is really making a tremendous difference. And it's hard to say. I do think it matters that the running back certainly matters because, you looked at the few snaps that Mike Majette got or the snaps that Ricky Brookings got, I think, in an earlier game, and it's not there in the same way that you see with Stevie Scott or with what we saw with Ronnie Walker Jr. In this game. But the fact that if you put a good running back with this line up to this point, it looks like they're able to open holes. They're able to redirect the defense. They're able to give the running backs enough space. Obviously, you haven't played a really good run defense so far, but it's certainly going to be a sort of year where you're not going to play good run defenses all the time. Yeah, you got to play your Ohio States and your Penn States and so forth, but Rutgers is not a good run defense. Purdue is not a good run defense at this point. Maryland's not a good run defense. And those are the teams that are on your schedule. And so that's what I'm, as much as I'm excited about Stevie Scott, I am excited at the fact that there seem to be a couple of running backs that can take the ball and behind this line can get yardage. And it's also, frankly, not just the running backs, because one of the things that we saw in this game was also Peyton Ramsey keeping the ball running with it and finding spots on options and getting yards. He ran for a touchdown, I think, in the second quarter. And that was a big part of what sprung the game open for this IU team, was the fact that the blocking was good almost regardless of who was running the football.
What point in the season are we at let's just say Morgan Ellison is able to come back? Obviously, it's tough to just say at the end of the year, to come back and just get into Big Ten play, having not played all year. Where is that divergence where, let's not talk about why he's at, let's just say he can come back. If you can just snap your fingers, when do we get to a point where even if he's available, it's like he's been out of play for too long?
I don't think there's ever a point. I look at it like this. If you have 3 really good running backs in your backfield, that's depth. That's the kind of depth IU never has. And the idea that you could rotate guys in, and that was, to some degree, that was what made 2016 work as well as it did, because you had Jordan Howard, I think,
and Divine
Redding. And that, even though Redding wasn't, he was like 80% of the back that Howard was. I mean, that's still a really good back that you've got in there, and that made it very difficult for defenses to take a down off. And
I think it was 2015, but I know what you're saying.
Sorry, 2015. Yeah. I mean, whatever the year was, like I said, my brain is fried because of the heat. But the idea that you would have a wealth of options in the backfield is frankly something that we're not used to with Indiana football. But if you can get that, that's great. And, again, we don't know what the situation is with Ellison. It's a very confusing thing right now, but
there's still there's still that carrot out there that he can come back and add to that depth, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple other things that we wanted to talk about offensively. The quarterback situation. So we weren't sure with the Virginia game. We were told, we were going to play Penix a couple of downs or a couple of drives, but Ramsey was running the offense well. Ramsey played the whole first half, and I think played the first series of the second half, and then Penix came in. Ramsey had another very efficient game. You look at the stats that he had: 20 of 27, 173 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. But of course, he also rushed for 43 yards on 6 carries, had a touchdown there. What we saw out of Penix in this game did not look as good as what we saw out of Penix in the Florida International game, but it was a much different situation. Like, the offense was still having to take shots down the field. They were still having to be a little more aggressive in that Florida International game. And so the Penix we saw in this was kind of muted. He had a great first throw. I think the first couple of throws he had a lot of zip on the ball. But frankly, IU's play calling was trending very much towards hey, let's not screw up because we don't want to have a turnover or something like that. So, even though Penix was 4 for 5 for 29 yards, we really didn't get to see the same sort of exhibition that we saw from him in the first game.
I mean, you don't want to talk about the battle between him and Mike Fiacable?
Yeah. No, I didn't. There wasn't. He didn't even throw the ball, unfortunately.
He had a nice run.
Yeah, 18-yard run. It's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, my notes are very conservative play calls of Penix, which is all I marked down while he was playing. Is that, and honestly, I'm a little bit annoyed at that, just because this would have been I know the idea of we don't want to screw up, but that goes back to that whole conservative. I would have loved to see just a couple shots, just a couple of deep throws, if not now, when, because Penix is going to have to learn these other aspects. I don't know, just doing an inside handoff and a run play option inside every single time did seem a little bit conservative. And it's kind of what real experience are you getting him? You're running the same play basically 85% of the time. I know he's learning a little bit about the reads, but I would have just liked to seen a couple, we're just going to let him loose for a couple of throws and just give him a little bit of experience with that. Versus, because now it's got to be in the Big Ten level.
Now there's something to be said for that. From the comments that Tom Allen made in the post game, and from just the fact that Ramsey again had a relatively mistake-free game. He had some throws in this, particularly that first drive in the second half, that I didn't think were particularly good, and I do worry about his propensity to throw the ball into coverage. He hasn't been punished by it yet, but you do worry about that down the road. But look, at this point, I have to say that Ramsey is playing within himself very well, and he's played within the concept of what IU needs to win football games, and really that's what matters. I guess my concern, if I have one, is I think we've seen the extent of Ramsey as a quarterback, and that extent is pretty limited in terms of the throws. And one of the frustrations I was having during the first half was, it seemed like every single time they threw the ball, it was like 2 or 3 seconds, and then immediately it went into the flat for a dump off pass. And it was just like over and over and over again. And yes, a couple of those throws ended up being broken by the wide receiver, and they got some decent yardage out of it. But it just, there were very few attempts to go down the field, and the few attempts that were down the field, they were very, very low, weakly thrown balls. They were kind of lofted balls where it was like, trying to get the ball over defenders rather than trying to get the ball by defenders. You can do that against Ball State. You can do that against FIU and Virginia. I don't know what kind of mileage you're going to get in the Big Ten with that. And so I do wonder, as you alluded to, whether Michael Penix can make those sorts of throws. And maybe we'll find out later. Maybe it ends up not being that big of a thing. And maybe it's just a situation where they look at Ramsey and say, look, over 3 games, the guy has been, at least in terms of the outcome of his stuff, he's been relatively flawless. He's thrown for 156, 150, and 173 yards. He's got 5 touchdowns. He's got 2 interceptions. And then he's rushed for, approximately 100 yards, a little over 100 yards for the season. And he's kept IU from being in a situation most of the time where they're imperiled defensively. And so, this seemed like the last chance to really let the leash off Michael Penix. And it's almost like, Peyton Ramsey played too well in the first half to put Penix in a situation to even be able to do that, because there was no reason to play aggressively in the second half.
But that would be my concern offensively going into the Big Ten is, our running game has looked really good. Our blocking has looked well. But, as you get into tougher defenses, you're going to need to have some running games to keep that honest. And what unfortunately we see a lot of is that, like you mentioned, our passing game is kind of an extension of the running game. Like we're dumping the ball in the flat, which is basically like a run. It's like a run to the sweep to the left or the right, because we're only passing it like to the flat or to the guys in the corner. And so it's like, even our passing game right now, the way it's constructed, is really just an extension of a run. And so you really need some passes that are, 7, 8, 9 yards into the secondary to keep the defense from just, and I think this is where we sometimes see our running game seizes up, and then we're trying to pass in the flat. And it's like the defense doesn't need to change their package because it's all just run defense.
It all works well when you're playing against teams that aren't faster than you and more powerful than you, and you don't have to stretch the defense. But if they know, IU's going to run, or IU's going to, throw short passes behind the line of scrimmage and try to block ahead of it, and your opposition can bring their defenders forward and really, jam things up, do you have the capacity at the quarterback position to get the ball over that, stretch the defense back out? That's going to be the big question. And that's probably the biggest offensive concern that I have at this point for this IU team moving forward is, we don't know whether they're going to have the capacity to do that. And, we'll just have to see. So far you have a hard time arguing with anything that this offense is doing in terms of the final outcome. It's more process that you have to look at.
Yeah. Before we go to defense, let's take a quick break and talk to one of our sponsors.
ZipRecruiter. No, go on, please.
Simply Safe. I was, I would like to say from CrimsonCast, I think we need to have a moment here to talk about the helmets. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, getting rid of the chrome striped helmets. But I, for one, anybody from IU Athletics is listening, the Block Eye helmet is so nice. It looks so good with the stripe down the middle. I'm comfortable if we're kind of trimming down our number of helmets. Let's take that one we wore today and make that helmet. That is what Stevie Scott Caulfield is running my platform for in 2018 as we go into the midterm elections. No, I really like that Block Eye helmet. I go back to what you said when I wanted to buy a helmet for my basement, and I was trying to figure out what logo to go with, and you said, which one have we won the most with on our hats? And it was that Block Eye. So I'm curious your thoughts, but I'm like, that helmet looks so nice. that I think if we're going to trim down, that's what we go with all year.
Well, I'm just confused because they told us there was only one helmet.
I know.
And it's
I remember you saying that.
Are there two helmets now? Like, what's going? I mean, like some guy was
fake news. Are you getting misinformation?
Yeah, some dude was. Well, no, it was a press conference that IU held, and some dude's ragging on us on Twitter, like, "How do you guys not know the helmet thing?" I was like, "Well, apparently IU doesn't know it either because apparently there's at least two helmet designs." So no, look, I mean, I grew up in the '80s. I'm a sucker for the block eye. You're never gonna talk me into thinking that we should have anything other than the block eye as our standard helmet. So let's make it the standard helmet. I understand there's this whole idea of like brand synergy, but I mean, it's such an iconic look for IU, and it's frankly, I think it stands out, particularly in this day and age, because there aren't I can't think of another team that's got a good looking like single letter on their helmet.
I mean, good looking ruins it. Illinois does the eye, but it's big and chunky. And
yeah, no, Illinois, their colors suck and their team sucks. It's like it's hard to take them seriously.
Northwestern used to have the N, but now they have the cat, which I kind of like their helmets.
Right, and they got Nebraska, I guess, would fall into that. But there's
you lose to Troy, I don't get to talk about your helmets.
That's a good point. Anyway, let's talk defense. So a good defensive effort for this IU team today. You had questions after that FIU game, and they certainly answered them in the Virginia game in what were very difficult situations and circumstances to try to play defense. And then, yeah, I mean, look, full disclosure, I don't think Ball State's very good. I didn't think they were very good coming in. I don't care what happened in South Bend. I think that Notre Dame did not take Ball State seriously. And I think that ultimately what we saw out of Ball State today is a lot closer to where they are as a football program than what we saw last week. All that said, it's still a Ball State team that, you have to take care of business with. And IU did a great job of that. I mean, they really bottled up Riley Neal, 12 of 24, 115 yards. Rushing wise, Ball State, 39 carries, 204 yards. I mean, that's not awesome, but a lot of it was just on long runs early. You saw another situation where IU didn't seem ready to come out and assert themselves on the first drive. Once they got past that, Ball State really struggled. There was that slight lull in the third quarter. But, other than that, this IU defense really got after it. They forced a turnover. They managed to put themselves, I think, in a position where they really strangled what Ball State was trying to do offensively. And I think that that's a really good sign moving forward. You look down at the tackles. I mean, Raekwon Jones had a tremendous game. 5 solo tackles. He had a sack. Jonathan Crawford had an excellent game. TD Roof, really emerged and looked excellent. And then Marcelino Ball, certainly at the Husky position, I think did a good job as well. I mean, all the guys that you need to show up in a game showed up in this game. And I think it's a really nice launching off point for this defense heading into Big Ten play. They've gotten progressively better now in every game. And I think this was obviously, again, you have to put a big asterisk next to the Virginia game for weather, but this was a better overall defensive game than they played against Virginia. And that's a really nice trajectory to have going into that Michigan State contest.
Yeah, I noticed one play in the second quarter, defensive lineman Mike Barwick broke through, put some pressure on the quarterback, didn't get the sack, but led to a bad pat, led to the quarterback kind of being flustered. And then I felt like Chris Collins or something like that. It was a really good play by Barwick. And I was like, I'm curious to just watch him a little more because I don't watch the D line much. Yeah. So I felt like Collins, when I was watching the line every game, I was really impressed by him. Like, he was getting double teamed. He was still getting pressure. I mean, I would say our whole D line looked really good, but a couple of the tackles that Crawford and Jones got were because of Barwick was basically getting double teamed or really sealing his guy off on the D line and making room for those guys to come in and get pressure on the quarterback. So I got to say, I was very impressed. I want to call him out on that. I think our D line looks really good. And like you said, I mean, we're just in the spot where we almost need to, we need to do like the old PlayStation thing where we play the first possession and then restart the game. Like, we just need to come out, tell the guys in practice, like, all right, now, it's our first drive that we suck, and the rest of the game we're fine. It's been that way Virginia, Florida International. Like, we just need to kind of make our defense think the first drive has already happened, and then we're good to go.
Yeah. No, it's everything you want out of the defense in a game like this you had.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
You could make the argument that IU should have won by more. but you could put that on the offense. You wouldn't put that on the defense. I mean, holding any team in college football to 10 points is a really good game. And so I take my hat off to the defense and what they did. And I think they're getting better. And I think that the leaders, the upper class leaders on this team, the ones that really had to step up, when you see them topping the statistical lines for defense in a game like this, you have to be excited about that, because that's the base that you're going to have to utilize in order to be successful in the Big Ten.
Can I get to an end of game nitpick?
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is full disclosure, complete nitpick, not a big deal. But at the end of the game, we're driving, we're in the red zone. It was tough to tell because the field stayed the same color of green on third down. I wasn't sure where the first down marker was. I mean, it was all the same green. I was very confused. But we get down to fourth down. It's like, a minute to go or 2 minutes to go. And
it's less than that, but yeah.
We go for it on fourth. Again, complete nitpick. But my thing is, when you have a field goal, it doesn't matter whether you score a touchdown or field goal. Like, the game's out of reach. You have a field goal unit, a special teams unit that's been really shaky throughout the year. Again, like, now you're kind of you have 13 stringers in there. You're kind of in practice mode in a game situation. Why not just send them out there and kick the field goal? Like, I know it's still going to be only like a 22, 24-yard field goal, but you have a field goal unit that you're already shaky with, you're not comfortable with. They have stuff blocked. I don't know. Like, I just thought that'd be a perfect time. Like, in a game, all we talk, getting practice in game situations. Why go for it and run it up even more? I don't know. As a nitpick, I'm just like, you should have kicked the field goal at the end just to get that cruise from practice.
I don't know. I actually liked the idea of practicing a fourth down call at the goal line. I'd rather
with a quarterback that you aren't going to ever do it with.
Well, I think it was more the running back thing. I think it was a running back and blocking scheme. It looked like an option play where they were trying, whoever the quarterback is, he had the option, and he should have just handed the ball off. Like, I would have been interested to see what would have happened. I think Walker was in the game at that point, but it would have been interesting to see. I think it's also there's a getting
our BCS profile up.
It's not that. It's like there's an image thing there where if you go for it on fourth down and you just keep the ball on the ground and they can't stop you, everybody's like, well, hey, they had a chance to stop them and they didn't. If you come in and kick a field goal and make it 41-10,
you're trying to throw
that looks cheap. I honestly, I looked to see if there was an over-under thing involved in this, but the over-under was 61.5. So I don't think that had anything to do with it. But it's no, I think it was just that. I don't think that Tom Allen wanted it to look like he was running the score, particularly on an in-state team that you're playing. I mean, high school coaches may have connections with Ball State. They don't want to see that. And again, I think there's a sort of a masculinity thing where, if you can't stop a running play with the third string quarterback and the backup running back in, c'est la vie. Nobody's going to shed any tears for you. But if you bring your field goal unit out, that everybody looks at you like, what are you doing? So anyway, we had a couple of questions on the various outlets. So let's go ahead and get to those real quick. So first of all, we had a question I mentioned earlier from Matt Uhl. Where did that go? Are we legit okay to dream of a 7 or 8 win season? Yeah, why not? I mean, look, I mean, what the hell? Dreaming's free. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think an 8-win season is going to happen. I think that would, and here's the reason why. I think that even though Ramsey's looked good and has been a good game manager so far, it's really hard for a team with a redshirt sophomore backed up by a true freshman at the quarterback position with a true freshman running back to think that they're going to win 8 games, particularly when you're playing in the Big Ten East. That's just there. It's such a long season, and it requires that that scenario basically requires that everything go right for your team along the way. And, when I say everything goes right, I'm not saying, beat Ohio State, beat Penn State. No, I'm saying don't lose to Iowa, don't lose to Maryland, don't lose to Minnesota, don't lose to Purdue, don't lose to Rutgers. Let me
pull up the media guide. The last time everything went right for Indiana football was
1967.
It never happened.
Right. Well, that's true. Well, no. Well, yeah. No,
yeah.
It's a good point. I guess you could theoretically say 1945, but they were war aided that year, so I don't even think that should necessarily count. But now, look, I think 7 wins is certainly in play. And if you look at the S&P Plus ratings, I think they might be rated as a potential 8-win team coming out of this week. So much depends on the opposition, and so much depends on how and whether this IU team continues to mature. Certainly, I think any route to an 8-win season is going to have to start with a win next week against Michigan State. It's going to have to start with a 5-0, record to start things off with. And I mean, look, that may be in play, but even if you do that, it's still a really, really tall task going the rest of the way. It's such a tough division, and there's so many good teams in it. And even if those teams aren't necessarily playing at their top level, the talent disparity, even though the gap has closed a little bit, is still pretty great between IU and some of those other teams.
Michigan's to me, it's a perfect example. Like, I think I don't think they're as great as they really thought they were going to be. Like, they're just in a down cycle right now, even with Harbaugh as the coach. And I think, you see teams like Ohio State and Michigan State pouncing on it, and we're getting so damn close. But like you said, it's that talent disparity. Like, everything has to go right in that game for us to be even close to winning against Michigan, because they're down.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, it could happen. I hope it does happen. As you've mentioned a couple of times, the IU Ohio State and IU Michigan series are rapidly creeping up the list of longest one-sided victory strings for the opposition.
Second, right? Second
and third.
Second. They're both. It's like both 22, or like 31 straight games or something.
And what's first?
Oh, God, I had it pulled out. I don't have it
fine, but no,
it was like somebody against TCU or something. I think it's the only one that's like an active, currently going every single year one.
It's possible, though. I mean, today we saw Syracuse knock off Florida State for the first time since like 1965 or something like that. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. But we're going to need to.
Ohio State's a little better than Florida State this year.
That's the thing. Now, but those are the keys to looking and saying, 8 wins is possible. I think 7 is there. I think 7 is a possibility. 7 is within the realm of what this IU team can control. But let's get to 6 first, and then figure things out from there. Because this has happened. Like, IU has had 3-0 starts. They've had good starts overall, and then reality slaps them in the face in late September or early October, and then there's always this long downward spiral that happens throughout the second half of the season. That's what I would like to see IU avoid.
The thing I'll say to Matt is, like, I'm fired up too. We'll get to the Michigan State here game before we wrap up. Like, I'm pretty fired up and excited. I was just talking about, Stevie Scott as freshman of the year, look at Heisman's. So I'm definitely trending upward. But that said, like, I still take a step back. What I thought about listening to your preview for Ball State is that, we still have a quarterback behind center that none of us feel comfortable could throw really with confidence past 15 yards. We have our third string, freshman running back is third string, start of the season, third string. Behind, our second string quarterback is a completely true freshman. Our defense has taken a lot of hits. We still, losing receivers. Like, there's just a lot of things there. If you just look at it, like, hey, if you just said, hey, Indiana next week is playing a team where the quarterback really can't throw past 20 yards. He's backed up by a true freshman, and the running back is a true freshman who is third string coming into the season because the top 2 guys are out. I'd be like, giddy up. I mean, so there's still that. And I still think we're going to have a game or two this year where that reality hits us. And it's like, yeah, I'm not sure what we were thinking.
Yeah, that's the thing. I would just say temper your expectations a little bit, but it's exciting to see IU perform as well as they did in this game. And that's I guess, the reason for the optimism. We had another question from Ta Lahajarat Sang in chat. What are the chances that IU starts 5-0? So, let's start with the 5th game in that, which is at Rutgers. You would look at what Rutgers did today, where they got destroyed at Kansas, and say, that'll be a walkover game. And yet it's, the temptation there is to assume that, and you worry with anything that you think would be a walkover game, particularly on the road. Yes, IU has gone in and beaten Rutgers at Rutgers. They've also gone in and lost at Rutgers in seasons when, in a season when Rutgers was not a very good football team. I think that was, it was in 2014. That Rutgers team, I mean, they were okay. They ended up That was that weird year where they won at Michigan, but that was also a year where they got annihilated by several teams in the conference. They ended up going to a bowl game that year. IU, that season was, should have probably done better than the 4-8 that they went. I look at it and I say there's no givens, even with a Rutgers team that looks rudderless and had to pull their freshman starting quarterback today because he couldn't handle the business. So that said, a loss to Rutgers would be a severe step back for the program. And I think I feel pretty good about that contest. So then you come back to this Michigan State game that's coming up. So with Michigan State, I say to myself, obviously this is a team that's in some crisis. They struggled in week 1 and barely won. They lost last week at Arizona State, who's probably not that great of a football team. They're on a bye this week. What is it that IU has to do to beat Michigan State? Obviously, Michigan State's not completely insurmountable. Of the 4 teams that form the top of the Big Ten East, they are the one that is closest to IU in terms of talent level, in terms of overall ability. But, this IU team, if they're going to be successful, the way I look at it is this. Going back to what we talked about earlier, this concept of, okay, IU's rushing the ball very well. Can they consistently do that in a game versus Michigan State? I don't know if they can just run the ball. I think that, yes, they've got the short passing game. I feel like they're going to need to get more out of the passing game than they've gotten so far, because otherwise, if you look at Michigan State, they've got the athletes. They have the ability to snuff out the run and make things difficult. So can you stretch the defense a little bit? Can you create momentum offensively? Can you finish off drives? Can you do all of those things that IU often struggles to do? And can you make the plays in moments when it matters? And that was what led IU to the victory a couple of years ago when they had Michigan State in. And they managed to pull off the win. It was a tight game. They had to execute towards the end when it mattered, and they were able to do that. What made that year weird was that was one of the few games where IU was actually able to do that in those situations. And it's frankly the bugaboo that left IU, I think, frustratingly short of bowl eligibility last year, because they weren't able to make those plays at the end of the game against Michigan. They weren't able to make the plays at the end of the game against Michigan State. So those are the big things I look at. I think IU's got the capacity to do all of that stuff. And so as far as how confident you should be about, maybe going 5-0, this IU team has to exhibit a level of maturity that might be a little beyond their capacity as such a young team that really hasn't played a top-level competition yet. But I think they've certainly got the talent to do so. It's just going to take a really good effort, and I think it's going to take a really good crowd that gives this team confidence throughout the course of the contest.
Yeah, I think things set up nicely. I'm still not sure, we can maybe get to it in a preview later, whether Michigan State having a week off is good or bad. I'm not sure where it fits in, but, being a 7:30 game, it'll be a night game.
By the way, I'm going to say it's bad. That's just my weighing in on that. I wish we could have played them this week. I really do. I think you get a team on the ropes. From a psychological perspective, you don't want to give them a week for the coaches to settle them down and say, hey, you guys are doing fine. Anyway, go ahead.
No, I think you're right. But I think things are lined up. And this is kind of my final point about looking toward this game is, something you and I have talked about many times in this podcast is we get to kind of these moments where Indiana has the ability to do something it hasn't done, whether it's, and sometimes it's a little bit more like, it's whether it's, beat Michigan or, but get to 6-0 or win 2 road home games. Go back and listen to any of our podcasts. Every year we have these moments, and some are a little more of a stretch than others, but we've kind of said like, this is a moment where, we can beat Michigan. It was like 2 years ago, last year, and even I think 3 years ago, like Harbaugh's first year, it's like, it was not out of the realm of possibility. Michigan was not a power team at that time. It was barely a top 25 team. And it's like, that would have been something that would have raised a lot of eyebrows around Bloomington and outside. And every single time we hit one of those points, we haven't been able to do it for a variety of reasons. Again, I think that we are at the precipice where, and this is a bit of a tougher ask than normal, but if we're able to find a way to beat Michigan State and we're kind of at that point where this program needs something to really flip the tables. Like I guess the win at Missouri was one of those moments where we're like, holy shit, this is different. It kind of then didn't really lead to anything else.
It didn't even lead to a bowl bid that year.
Yeah. But hey, winning a bowl game would be like one of those big moments. But this is, I feel like we are at the point now, again, we have a 7:30 game. It's a night game. I feel like the place should be pretty jazzed up. It's, big lights, big stage, Big Ten primetime. It's a good, but it's not going to be super hot in the sun. I think we'll have a great crowd. And, I think it's one of these moments where this could be transformational for this year, because if we win this and we're able to go 5-0, looking back, I know you're a bit thrown off, but when was the last time Indiana started 5-0?
Oh boy. That's a great question. And I feel like I'm going to miss on this one. 19.
I'll give you a hint. I think it's only happened once.
Wow. Okay. Well, if it's only happened once, it was 1945. They didn't lose a game that year.
Oh, you're right. No, well, no.
What?
No, you're wrong on all accounts. The last time it happened was 1967. Yeah. They started 8-0.
Okay.
Went to the Rose Bowl. In 45, they tied game 2 against Northwestern.
Right. That's right. That's
asterisk,
right.
Asterisk.
Yeah.
I mean, I pass at 45. The standings get really weird and the scores get odd. But I mean, it's one of these things where like starting 5-0 would be something that would I think it would
never been done before. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Basically, it hasn't been done in the modern era. And then, yes, we'll go to Ohio State, we'll lose. But where I think it's transformational is now I think everyone would be everyone is okay with losing at Ohio State under those circumstances. We come back 5-1. We're now homecoming against Iowa. That's a huge game. Now you have what could be a fired up crowd, a fired up team. Like you're 5-1 going into Iowa. I mean, I think it leads to this entire season where now, then we have Penn State at home. If we don't win that, I don't think anyone's going to be thrown off. But it's like, I don't know. I could see us starting to run downhill if we start the season 5-1. So, and I think it could make that Iowa game a really tough environment to Iowa to play in. So that's where I get fired up. And that's where I say, again, this is a moment where, we always come back to this. We've spent hours in this podcast talking about, fans and fireworks and stripes and the Shark song and the band, like all this nonsense. Like in the end, they have to win football games. And yes, this one against Michigan State is a little bit more than a little bit of a deeper ask, but like this is the kind of shit that will change people's minds and change perceptions. And this is the kind of thing that can really help turn this thing around and really get the Tom Allen era on the right path. And in the end, it comes down to like winning a game against Michigan State really sets you up at 5-0 and 5-1 home against Iowa.
Yeah. A couple other quick comments. Stuff and Things in chat asks, is this the most balanced IU team that they've had this century? I mean, that's an interesting question.
I think that little stretch where we had Tevin Coleman and Nate Sudfeld, I think we were really balanced. Like, unfortunately, we didn't get it long enough because of injuries here and there, but
right.
I felt that was a really balanced team that we had there.
Yeah, I mean, the year that Coleman rushed for 2,000 yards and Sudfeld, I mean, that problem that year, that 2,000-yard year for Coleman was that was the year Sudfeld got injured and you had 6 games of Xander Diamont. Yeah. You could make an argument that the following year was a better example of that because Sudfeld threw for 3,500 yards, 27 touchdowns, and Jordan Howard and Divine Redding combined for 2,200 yards and 18 touchdowns. So offensively, probably the most balanced. As far as offense and defense, I think the jury's still out to some degree, but you do have to look at this team and say, at least for this century, like the only other team I could think of that maybe had a similar sort of balance between offense and defense might have been the 07 team that went to the bowl game. Yeah. That would be the one, because every other team this year or this century, with the possible exception again of that 2016 team, because that team they were passable offensively and they were really good defensively. There was some balance there, but I think this team certainly has the capacity to be a better team defensively, and certainly I think also offensively, if they can get the passing game, really up and running, there's the chance as far as that's concerned. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I think we've finished up what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be back later on in the week, probably Thursday or so, talking about the Michigan State game. Again, 7:30 kick, Big Ten Network, should be a pretty big game. So hopefully everybody's going to get a chance to either come and see it in person or at the very least watch it on television.
Hey, last thing. How's the new stadium? Like, what's it? I haven't been there yet. I'll be there next week. But what's it look like closed in? Like, how do you like the feel?
It's a cool setup. I mean, it's a little bit off-putting because there's not really seats in that south end zone. It's closed, and they've got like this nice glass on the glass windows. They've got like Memorial Stadium written out, so that looks pretty cool. And then there's people standing on the upper deck, which I think is pretty cool. But it's a kind of a non-traditional sort of look because it's not like there's like grandstands back down in that end. And so, but overall, I like it. I mean, I think it feels more intimate. Like you're no longer looking at trees when you look into the southern portion of the stadium, which is nice. But, it's going to take some
minivans going up the hill.
Yeah. I was also, because I foolishly did not pack sunscreen.
Ooh.
And the sun was right behind me. I managed to like turn my body, kind of in a northwesterly direction. So I didn't really look too much at the south end zone because I was really trying to focus my whole body so that I could like live in my own shadow. And so far it seems to have worked. So
it's a good name for a song, Live in My Own Shadow.
I think that was an Oasis song. But anyway, thanks to all you folks for listening in either live or on the podcast version of this. If you'd like to get involved with the show, by all means, send us messages throughout the course of the week at CrimsonCast on Twitter. You can also catch us most of the time live when we do these shows, either on Thursday or Friday when we do the pregame, and then certainly on Saturday or Sunday whenever we get around to doing the recap. So for Scott, I'm Galen. This is CrimsonCast, and we look forward to continuing to talk with you, not just about IU football, but also coming up here in just a couple of weeks about IU basketball as they get ready for Hoosier Hysteria, which is only 14 days away, which seems early and crazy, but exciting at the same time. So for all of us to all of you, we'll catch you folks on the flip side. So long, everybody.